Welcome to the Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon.
I'm Stuart.
We're both property people running our own businesses. This podcast is just us chatting, as we often do, about anything and everything property. Last week, I was doing a lot of talking about how I'm currently looking at getting started on a new property investment. So it's not the start of my property investment journey, but it is the start of a new property investment for me at the moment. And this week, we're going to talk in a sort of complete contrast at the other end of the process, because Stuart, you're still, if I can put that in without sounding too depressing, trying to sell some of your properties. And you've also added an extra one into the mix as well. So I think you're glutton for punishment really at the moment. So where would you like to start talking about the properties you're selling? Maybe the new one. How about we start with the new one that's up for sale? What's that and why are you selling it?
Yeah, so we've added a 7-bed. In fact, we put it on the market, I think, shortly before the end of December. So it's been on a short while. And that is a 7-bed professional let. It's fully let. And it's actually a good income earner, actually. So the question you've asked is why sell it is a good one. And I think a lot of people would ask that. So it's the fourth. So we're actually selling 4 properties right now, which, as you say, makes me feel like a glutton for punishment. But the 7-bed we are selling, it's a really simple equation that we need the equity out of that property. So as you know, we do refinance most, if not all, of our properties to unlock as much capital as we can. And this one was no different. But because we've done some work to it, because it's fully tenanted, it's a good price. It is, I would say, being sold for approximately 15% more than we bought it for. And we completed the purchase, I believe, in 2017. So that's not a bad return.
Yeah.
For the sales. And of course we've had the income from that.
You're selling this to presumably you are trying to sell this to investors, because it's a 7-bed HMO in an Article 4 area. I think most of your properties are, so I assume it is.
Yep.
Okay, so it's probably too big a property to sell to non-investors as is. It's got a lot of inherent value in it because it's a fully licensed and set up HMO in an Article 4 area. Did you think that actually makes it more valuable to sell at this point than if it was just a big single dwelling?
Yeah, the first thing I would say from my perspective, if I was going to sell this back into the residential market, I would probably do that myself, as in empty the property out, let the property empty, then reconfigure, refurbish so that it was a residential, because I think if someone was coming into the market for that size of property, not never going to happen, but unlikely that someone would come in with that in mind to do, particularly as you've said, it's in the area that these are in. Obviously, you can imagine there's other co-living stroke HMOs in that area. What was I was going to answer the question. I forgot what the question was.
It's interesting that you've forgotten the question, because I think I actually phrased it exceptionally badly. What I was trying to ask was, what do you think is the difference in value to if you were selling it as an empty single dwelling compared to selling it as you are with tenants as a fully set up HMO investment in an Article 4 area?
I've often heard it said that the quality of the question determines the quality of the answer, but I'm not going to throw that all on your lap. I'm going to accept some responsibility on that as well.
Well, no, I mean, talking a little bit about sort of behind the scenes of how we put this together, I definitely think you're the stronger interviewer out of the pair of us. I waffle lots and go on about stuff and forget what I'm saying. You're far better at being the structured speaker. So anyway, I'll let you get back to it. Now you've probably forgotten the question again.
That's why I like you, Simon. Always got the compliment. Thank you. So that is actually a really good question. And it's one that I haven't looked at properly because we never considered taking the tenants out of the property. It's fully let. It didn't make sense. But your assumptions are actually really spot on, because it's an Article 4. In fact, I've looked at the Article 4 direction map for Plymouth. And I think I can say that most of Plymouth is under Article 4, if not all of the area that you would ever want to have a co-living property in. You can't go outside of it. So that actually does add a premium to properties that have existing licenses. So that is 100% true. I think the market has changed a bit though. So there is that premium. So if a property already has the HMO license, if it's already tenanted, I think there is a premium on that. But my view of the market is that has still declined over the last couple of years because there is a saturation. I don't want to get into too many of the market economics of this, but I think we've talked about it before. We have an oversupply of property compared to the demand of the property that we have in that area now. So that I think there's a little bit of a balance that's happening. That all said, we're still quite happy with the price that we've put it on the market for, slightly lower than we wanted, but the asking price is very close to what we're looking for. So as we record this, I haven't accepted the offer, but we're probably very close. But to answer the question properly, if it were a residential property in the right street, I would expect similar or potentially more. But this particular street that this property is in is not the sort of street I would expect someone to pick as a residential road. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or someone that had a family that wanted that type of property. Although it's in a good central location, I think there's a fair amount of work to be done to get it to where I'd want. My other properties, I've got a few properties in another street. Again, I haven't examined the true difference, but it is something that I had been thinking about because of the massive oversupply of co-living properties. And I call them co-living purely because HMO is a council term, and I just don't think they're the most creative people in the world, and it doesn't really describe the property well. But in another street, I think there is definitely worth looking at whether or not we can refurbish properties back to a good degree. But I'm just not sure the difference in asking price is worth the amount of investment from my side to do that. But I think there's probably a strategy there for someone that wishes to do it. Hopefully that did answer the question.
If this property was set up as a single dwelling, how big would it be? How many bedrooms would it typically have?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a fairly large property. It's got at least 4 floors, and I say at least because I haven't been there for a while. But the second kitchen is on a mezzanine floor. So, as we've kind of alluded to, it's in a street with other properties of that style, with probably 5 or more bedrooms with more than 5 people staying in them. So, it's unlikely people with families would want to stay in this particular property. And just thinking about the property itself, of the bedrooms, you've probably got the ground floor would actually be rather than a bedroom or 2 bedrooms would be a dining area. So I imagine realistically you're looking at a 4/5 bed, but it would need a lot of work to reconfigure it back to something resembling how you'd want to live as a family.
You mentioned a second kitchen, so clearly that, for starters, is unusual in a family home. So that would need to come out, and as you say, you've got to reconfigure bedrooms back to dining rooms or what have you. And then, you've got a 4 or 5 bedroom house. It's definitely sort of bigger family market. And if all of their neighbours are houses split up into individual room dwellings, and so I think that would be a difficult sale, that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't usually trust the kids with their own kitchen. To be fair, they're not of the age where I'd let them have their own. Being under 12.
Yeah, although we've got a 12 and a 14-year-old, and they have actually started cooking us dinner. This is brilliant.
Wow, that is really good.
It's not entirely unsupervised, and sometimes by the time we sit down to eat, we don't actually have any cutlery left because they've used it all in the preparation. But apart from those minor hitches, it's just a welcome development. So yes. Anyway, we've wandered a little bit from property.
Yeah, when I bought the property, it was already a 7-bed. It was an empty 7-bed, but I looked at it and thought about where we could go with it if things didn't go so well. And my view would have been that we'd split it into flats because it was already kind of split that way, because in the basement level, you've got a bathroom, which we've done quite nicely, and 2 bedrooms down there, and then you've got a lounge as well, and then we've got a couple of bedrooms on the ground floor. Then you've got kitchen on the mezzanine, and then a couple more bedrooms, and then you go up into what is a loft space, but it's a very big loft space, head height for a bedroom. So, like I say, it's one of those where even if it were on the right street, as in someone would want to live there, and the other thing from my perspective is the other properties we've got are very nice in terms of curb appeal. They're good Victorian, good aesthetics, if you like. This one, not so much. So I think there's too many factors that would have prohibited it being, or going back to residential. I think it's probably been that way for some time. And as you said, that street will be lots of students, lots of mixed houses. So probably not somewhere you're going to go to if you've got a young family.
Yeah, so I think sort of the conclusion here is converting it back to a single dwelling would be expensive and would probably actually reduce its value on the market. So, yeah, probably best not to do that.
Yeah.
My next question is selling it with tenants versus emptying it and then selling it without tenants, but still as an HMO co-living investment property. Did you weigh up those 2 options? I mean, obviously, given the situation with evictions right now, obviously that would play into that calculation. But yeah, what were your thoughts on those 2?
To be entirely honest, when I put this on the market just before Christmas, I just wanted to see what the market would be like for this particular property. So I had no intention of removing any tenants or serving notice. And as you've said, and as we've talked about on this podcast, you're looking at 6 months. And on another property we're selling, we do have that challenge, by the way. But on this one, and in this area, again, I haven't thought about this prior to this podcast, but my view on this particular investment area of in and around Plymouth is that a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people will be investing from outside of the area. And if we think about Plymouth as a destination, it's not like Leeds or Manchester or those other destinations that are oft spoke about, where actually you can probably get to them in a couple of hours, given the right tailwinds and the right transport. They're better, I guess, investment areas for people that are looking for lower cost investment. Let's just say that. Plymouth, on the other hand, is not quite the same, because obviously it depends where you're coming from, but it's not as easily. Basically, the infrastructure from other cities isn't as good as it is in the rest of the country, essentially. So if you're coming from anywhere outside of the southwest, even from Bristol, you're looking at a couple of hours to get into the town. And so the point I'm making here is that a lot of people that are investing that are out of town are standard investors. In fact, this one you'll like. I had an offer on this only 2 days ago where someone offered almost the asking price, but didn't want to view the property. And said, this is my offer, it's my first and final, and yeah, do you want to take it? And the estate agent has been very, very good about it, obviously relayed that and their concerns, and my riposte to that was, to be honest, I'd just be really uncomfortable selling it to someone that hadn't even looked around it, because my view, and it'd be interesting to hear yours, but my view of someone that hasn't even looked around a property, what is the propensity for that sale to actually complete? Because there are so many things that would come up. And if you've never even wanted to understand about the property, I just think that the risk is much higher that sale would fall through.
Perhaps they're just looking at it as the numbers. And if they're actually that detached from the investment that they aren't too worried about the property itself, I wonder if perhaps that would make it a better sale prospect, because they aren't going to worry about the details so much, I wouldn't have thought. So a surveyor will go round, and assuming they say it's okay, then they're just going to say that's fine, that the numbers work. And yes, we've got a budget set aside for repairs or refurbishment, although obviously it's got tenants in, so it probably doesn't even need refurbishing. And they can just play it as a real sort of financial investment without any attachment to the property or concern about the property itself. So I wonder if that might indicate that they're actually a larger purchaser and hence more secure in their offer.
Yeah, it could well be. And the truth is, we had a better offer come through on the same day, so we didn't need to consider it. I had my concerns, but the point I was making to your question was that in this area, and it might be the same in others, but that was my thinking, is that we get a lot of people really that are just looking at those numbers. They're not as interested in coming up and touching the walls or walking around like we might if we were going to make those same investors. So they are just looking at the yields, and the yields are good. So to your point about the consideration of tenanted or not tenanted, for me, it was offered as a fully tenanted investment vehicle, because when you look at the net yields, it's one of those I look at and I go, wow, that is pretty good. I should probably keep this for the longer term. But assuming you're going to then ask me, so just remind us why you're going to sell that property, it is because I have taken external funds, investor funds, to buy properties. So we have obviously several, given that we are selling 4, where I have taken investor funds and we are paying that investor interest because, as we said before, they want something in return, strangely enough. And the interest payments do put a lot of, I think we call it technically downward pressure on the cash flow, but essentially it's cost, it's expense. So the interest expense is coming out of the business. And what I did was, which was quite technical for me, I actually modeled a forecast of my property business, both with and without this property. And really interesting for me, and I did this on a 24-month period from this month, which took me some time, took a lot of numbers, but hypothetically what it showed me was that yes, the top line revenues would decrease because this property generates around it would be around the 34k mark per annum. So obviously top line revenue, which for me is definitely vanity, but taking the costs out, the cost of the interest that I would save as a result of having sold the property, the cost of the mortgage, in fact, the 2 mortgages, the existing mortgage and the further borrowing, the cost of all of the expenses, all attached to that one property, although the top line goes down and, of course, the profit decreases because of that, overall, the property business, the profit percentage, the net profit percentage has increased over that time. And that's kind of what I'm looking to do. And this is a much longer conversation that we can have another time. But when thinking about the property business, my mistakes have been because I've been very short-termist. And this is probably why some of these things are happening now. But I thought it was just quite interesting aside to talk about that. That was the rationale. Actually, when I modeled it, the business looks a little bit healthier. Yes, we're making less money, but actually the profits increased. So just to explain it, although the profits decreased from this property, because we've taken so much cost out, we're not losing as much. It's not as straightforward. So that therefore for me made it a good business decision.
Yeah, that opens up lots and lots of other questions that we need to put in another episode. we need to we need to look at sort of tactics for property business growth and effectively the costs that can come with that growth, or certain tactics of growth. And I know we've got different approaches to that, and our thinking on it has evolved as well over time. So yes, we definitely need to come back to that. But for today, seeing as we're talking about selling properties, I think we should just and we're nearly out of time, we should have a little recap on where your other 3 properties are that are for sale. So do you have offers on any of the others? Are any of them progressing? Or
so the good news is, yeah, the 3 out of 4 have offers that have been accepted.
Congratulations.
So thank you. I'm going to rip the plaster off and just say, so the Croydon flat that we refurbished, we've spoken about before, this is the one with the EWS one. That is back on the market, but we are trying to solve some of the problems around the EWS one. We won't get into that here, but that's going to be a bit of a longer burn and forced a few uncomfortable conversations. But so that is on the market, but really we don't want to sell it just yet. We want to hopefully get the EWS1 survey done so that we can get a little bit closer to market value and possibly, hopefully, make a little bit of money on that property, which currently we're not. So that's that one. We then have a 1-bed flat in the southwest, which we are sold. That is with a current tenant, and we've had challenges with this particular tenant. And I had good dialogue with the tenant up until the point where I've phoned her, again, wanting to be transparent. Even though I have a letting agent, I thought I'm going to phone the tenant directly, let the tenant know that we are going to sell. We've had it accepted, and it's bad news for her, I appreciate. But if we can just come to an informal agreement, and if they would let me know how long they wanted to move out. That didn't happen. The tenant then went MIA, and despite calls and texts, no longer responds. So unfortunately, I had to serve the notice, but we've covered that off, that we are looking we're looking at about 6 months. I'm hopeful that we can sort something out, but that property is selling. And then the studio flat, we also have I think a pretty close to cash buyer on that as well. And that's going through. So I think they're trying to push it through for the end of March. That happened a little while ago. So given that they are cash buyers, I think the survey's done. We're just waiting for for a management pack because it is a lease property. But so mostly good news in terms of the acceptances, but we've been here before. So we treat defeat and victory as the same imposters. We wait till contracts are exchanged and then we take it as read.
It sounds optimistic, trying to complete by the end of March. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw a stat recently that currently the average completion time is 134 days. So I mean, that's nearly 5 months. So if you had an offer even at the beginning of this year, the end of March is obviously only 3 months. So you're, I think, ambitious, but if they can do it, then great.
It is ambitious. To be fair, from our side, obviously we don't have any. Well, we do have some interest in it, because if we sell it before the end of March, it falls into the last tax year, and and certainly you know all about CGT recently. So if that can go into last year, that would be great, because obviously we're selling 2 properties personally. The 1-bed flat isn't making huge amounts of money, so I'm not overly concerned. So if it did fall into next tax year, I'm not that bothered. But it just changes how we approach things in the next tax year if that doesn't happen.
And if you can spread your CGT between 2 tax years, and you get 2 lumps of tax allowance. So
yeah, correct. And because we own the properties in personal names, we each get an allowance. So we try and obviously want to push the sale into last year. The buyer is cash. I think they've done things rapidly. We've spoken with the solicitor. He said that they are gunning for it, but as you know, we shall wait and see.
Well, good luck. I hope you have a bit more success on those sales this time round, because
thank you.
At least one of those properties has been here before. So
yes,
hopefully it goes better this time. And with that relatively good news of 3 properties with offers and hopefully progressing, and only 1 left unsold, I think it's probably time to finish up for today. So thank you very much to everyone who's been listening. We really do appreciate you getting in touch and letting us know what you think. So please do visit the website and fill in the contact form if you wish, or leave us a rating and review. We're always very happy to read those as well. And until next week, you can find show notes at thebusinessofproperty.com.